the kingdom of Arendelle, Princess Elsa was born with a magical gift, the power to create and control ice and snow. As a child, Elsa was fascinated by her powers and loved to play with them, making snowflakes dance in the air and creating tiny snowmen with a mere flick of her wrist. But as she grew older, Elsa began to realize that her powers were not just a source of wonder and joy, but also a source of danger and fear. She struggled to control her abilities and often found herself accidentally plunging the kingdom into eternal winter. Elsa's parents, the king and queen, were worried about their daughter's powers and the potential harm they could cause. They decided to keep Elsa's abilities a secret, locking her away from the outside world and hiring tutors to teach her how to control her powers. But the more Elsa tried to suppress her powers, the more they seemed to grow stronger. She became isolated and withdrawn, afraid of hurting those she loved. Her sister, Anna, was the only one who knew about Elsa's powers, and she was sworn to secrecy. As the years passed, Elsa's powers continued to grow, and she became more and more withdrawn. She stopped playing with Anna, stopped going outside, and stopped living. She was trapped in a prison of her own making, afraid of her own abilities. On the day of Elsa's coronation as the Queen of Arendelle, her powers finally broke free. In a moment of stress and anxiety, Elsa accidentally plunged the kingdom into eternal winter, covering everything in a thick layer of ice and snow. The people of Arendelle were shocked and frightened, and they didn't understand what was happening. They blamed Elsa for the sudden change in weather, and they began to fear and ostracize her. Elsa, feeling ashamed and afraid, ran away from the kingdom, determined to protect her people from her powers. She built an ice palace in the mountains, where she could live in isolation and keep her powers under control. But Anna was determined to find her sister and bring her back home. She set out on a journey to the mountains, facing many dangers and obstacles along the way. When she finally found Elsa, she was met with resistance and fear. Elsa was afraid of hurting Anna, and she didn't know how to control her powers. She told Anna to leave, to go back to the kingdom and forget about her. But Anna refused, and she tried to convince Elsa to return with her. In the heat of the argument, Elsa's powers surged out of control, and she accidentally shot a blast of ice at Anna. But just as all hope seemed lost, Kristoff, a rugged mountain man, and his trusty reindeer Sven appeared out of nowhere and saved Anna from the ice. Elsa was devastated, and she realized that she had almost killed her own sister. She was consumed by guilt and shame, and she didn't know how to make things right. But then she remembered something her parents had told her, something she had forgotten in her fear and isolation. They had told her that her powers were a gift, and that she should use them wisely. Elsa realized that she had been using her powers for the wrong reasons. She had been using them to hide and to fear, instead of to love and to protect. She decided to face her fears and to learn to control her powers, not for her own sake, but for the sake of those she loved. With newfound determination, Elsa began to practice using her powers, learning to control them and to wield them with precision. She started small, making tiny snowflakes dance in the air, and gradually worked her way up to bigger and more complex feats. As she practiced, Elsa began to realize that her powers were not a curse, but a blessing. She could use them to make the world a more beautiful and wonderful place, instead of a cold and frightening one. Finally, the day came when Elsa was ready to return to the kingdom. She was nervous and afraid, but she knew that she had to face her fears and make things right. She used her powers to reverse the eternal winter, and the kingdom of Arendelle was once again filled with sunshine and warmth. The people of the kingdom were overjoyed, and they welcomed Elsa back with open arms. They realized that they had been wrong to fear and ostracize her, and they apologized for their mistakes. Elsa, grateful for their forgiveness, vowed to use her powers wisely from now on. She promised to always think before she acted, and to consider the consequences of her words and actions. And so, Elsa lived happily ever after, ruling the kingdom of Arendelle with kindness, wisdom, and courage. She used her powers to make the world a better place, and she never forgot the lesson she had learned, to use her words wisely. Years later, when Elsa was old and wise, she would tell her children and grandchildren the story of how she had learned to control her powers and to use them for good. She would remind them that words have the power to both heal and harm, and that they should always be used with care and consideration. And the moral of the story, which Elsa would repeat again and again, was this: use your words wisely, for they have the power to change the world.